The church is not immune to the growing mental health crisis, certainly not pastors and leaders, but we don't always know where to get quality mental health resources for helping to create resilient individuals and churches. But today's guest is passionate about bridging the gap. This is the Embodied Faith podcast with Jeff and Sid Holsclaw, where we are exploring a neuroscience-informed spiritual formation produced by Grassroots Christianity, which is growing faith for everyday people. Laura Howe is our guest. She is a clinical mental health social worker, addiction counselor, and project manager. She's project managing a bunch of things, which is awesome. She has spent 15 years supporting and serving the marginalized and suffering in her local community, and she helped launch Hope Made Strong, which is an organization dedicated to helping local churches care for their communities without burning out. Amen and hallelujah. And as part of that, I think we're going to hear the whole story. She also launched the Church Mental Health Summit, which is happening this October 10th, which is the same day as the World Mental Health Day. So Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I'm so excited to connect with both of you.
Yeah, well, this connection came about because of a connector friend of ours who put us together. I was like, oh, you guys should talk and meet. And so that's how we had an informal phone call, I don't know, I think a month ago. And just heard about
Yeah.
some of the things
Yeah.
you're doing. And Sid and I are like, wow, that is like really cool. So you're doing this thing called the Church Mental Health Summit. And is it the second or third or fourth year that you've done this?
This will be our fourth
Okay.
year. So,
Wow.
yeah. So,
So no longer
Great.
we'll
it's
just try this out once or twice. Now this is like a thing.
It's an annual thing.
well, the funny thing is the idea came, and we'll go into that story later, but when I did this, the first one, I was blown away at the response. And then I was like, okay, God, you got 3 more years and then we're renegotiating.
I think
Well,
that,
so
This
this
is the 4th
that is
year.
perfectly
so it's a
reasonable.
renegotiation after this, huh?
Oh, it's so funny how we try to barter and negotiate with God. Isn't that interesting?
I think it's mostly biblical. So what is the Church Mental Health Summit? Or where did this dream?
Well, which question do you want her
rest?
to answer? You asked her
I don't
two
know.
things.
You're the great question asker, Sid. So what question would be the next best question?
Well, why don't we start with what is the Church Mental Health Summit, and then you can tell us how you got into
Awesome.
it or how it came about.
Sounds good. I think this is going to be a fun conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to this. Church Mental Health Summit is a one-day free event where we bring together people with all different lived experience. They're practitioners, they're pastors, they're peers, all talking about faith and mental health and how the church can equip and how they and their resources can equip the local church to support mental health in their leaders, in their congregants, and in their communities. And it is only an online digital event, although might give you a sneak peek behind the scenes information about what might be coming up. And I say that very hesitantly with the might be coming up, maybe. But
Depending on how that
it is
renegotiation goes.
exactly. Oh my goodness. It's right on point. And really just want to lower the barriers to access. When I was doing mental health in my church or developing a care ministry, I was struggling to find who is out there doing really great things. It all seems siloed and pieced apart. And so this is just trying to put forward, this is what's happening currently in the space of mental health and faith, and this is how your church can engage. We all like different pizza joints. We all like different hamburger joints. And so not everything is going to fit for every church. So this is an opportunity to be a Costco sampler of all different resources and tools and people who are engaging in this space. So it's on World Mental Health Day and it is virtually online.
And you said it,
Not virtually online, but online as a virtual summit.
and it's entirely free.
It is. World Mental Health Day is October 10th. So in honor of that, and thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, it is free on World Mental Health Day. Now, a lot of churches use this as a tool to do ongoing training for their teams, whether it's a staff retreat or volunteer onboarding or maybe just conversations throughout the year. So they purchase an access pass. But for people who just want to be able to peruse through, look, see what's out there, yes, it is free on October 10th.
That's amazing.
And you could
Like, what an incredible resource.
peruse.
Because you said there's how many people or like how many videos that I mean, it's massive, right?
It is massive. It is about 70 talks, give or take a few. Some people, life happens, the speakers have to bow out last minute,
Right.
but we are looking at around 70 talks this year,
Wow.
all categories into 4 different categories. So I try to break it down a little bit easier, but every year the topics are just so broad. Yeah, around 70 in
Wow.
total.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So if you could jump in like the day of for free, but then I'm just trying to get the
Yeah.
mechanics. But then if you're like, oh, I really want to like watch this more or wish so and so or our staff, then you
Mhm.
can buy the thing and then you have it forever, like all the stuff. Okay.
Exactly. Yep, all the stuff all the time.
Got it.
It's like Netflix where you just log in and then you can scroll through, click on any talk you want and watch it. And it's that on October 10th. Like there's no schedule.
Oh,
This
okay.
is what people have a hard time wrapping their heads around. It's how does this work? There's 70 talks. How do you even schedule that? There is no schedule. I am pretty open about saying that everything is pre-recorded. It's got Costco sampler size, right? So there's the little micro TED Talks, 15, 20 minutes from each speaker, and you can just scroll through and pick the ones that you want to watch. But many people say, how do I access, or I want to
Mm,
show someone, or can I use this? Can I invite my congregation or have a webinar or use this as a community outreach for my church? And absolutely, yes, you can grab an access pass for your church to use.
awesome.
okay, so whoever thought we would see the day where there would be a Netflix for in the church? Like,
Ta-da!
that's
Here it is.
incredible. Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit of how this came about, but is there anything more? You said that when you were in your church trying to find, you said you felt like you're in a silo, so you thought it'd be great to bring everybody together. Is there more behind that story of how this came to be?
Yeah, I think frustration or anger is a great catalyst for action.
Mm,
And this is definitely one of those stories. So, as a social worker offering counseling and crisis work and working within my community, as you mentioned in the outset of the podcast, that's what I've been doing for 15 years. So I had no intention in being entrepreneurial or ministry minded. Love church, love Jesus, been on missions trip, definitely have a heart for the local church, but never had that as the intention. But the frustration grew as I was working in the community, but yet going to church. And I don't know if anyone's caught on my accent, it's very slight, but I am Canadian, and so our healthcare system is quite different. So working in a secular community while going to church, there was restraints and constraints and ethical responsibilities I had to uphold. And so the frustration was about there's the Canadian right there,
yeah.
about
Yeah. I hear it.
the
Wait,
the
how do you say the word that you pull your car into if it's not full of stuff? Like when you drive up your driveway and you pull into the
the
thing?
garage.
Oh, okay.
That was very
I've heard people
American.
See, I'm from very American. So I'm right cl I'm about an hour and a half from Buffalo, so I'm pretty
Okay,
close to
so
the
you got
border.
the
So
American accent
it's
for that word.
yes, it
Okay.
does change throughout the country, much like the US have
Sure,
different
sure.
accents. Yeah.
Typical American, right? We just believe all Canadians speak the same way. It's so
Yeah.
so American of us,
That's
yeah.
right.
Okay.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. But when I was in my church, I would be hearing what they were saying about those who were needing support. A lot of assumptions were made, and they weren't accurate to what I was seeing in the community or even how the church was offering support. No shame on my local church. Love them to bits. I was part of the conversation. I just think we all make assumptions, like you said, of what people need. And from my perspective of being half in the community, half in the church, it just they weren't accurate. And so I'm like, there has to be a better way. We need to be able to care for people better. The church is an incredible place for people to find healing. I think what the core needs that people have, and I say this a lot in my Hope Made Strong work of belonging, purpose, and hope. These are core needs that every person has. The church is exceptional at providing. We just miss the opportunity of doing it. And so that's where the passion came from, or the interest, or the spark, I guess, the frustration that provoked me, the catalyst to start the Church Mental Health Summit is like, we need to do
Mm,
better. We just really need to do better. So how can we learn from each other? Not don't reinvent the wheel. You don't have to be all things to all people, but what is really good work out there? What are the tools that have impact and outcomes that we're like, okay, this is a reliable resource that might work in my community. And so that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and That I mean, first of all, it's so exciting and exciting that it's 4 years in a row. I know that I think I encounter people all the time, myself included, right? Where there are moments where you're just like, I don't know how to deal with this. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
how to handle this. I don't know how to care for this person well. I don't know where my role ends and somebody else needs to begin. I don't know what the boundaries are, like with and so can you maybe say a little bit more about how you address those kinds of questions?
Absolutely. So the summit is split into 4 different tracks. The first one's culture and global, or global and culture. And we're talking about missions and those who are serving in a missionary or cross-cultural context, because I think there's some unique experiences that
Yeah.
they face, as well as cultural impacts. And so I don't want to prescribe a certain way of how someone would engage with a person, because I think it is contextual to their culture, their community, their experience. And so we want to offer different perspectives. And so what is the Asian American experience? What is the mental health and faith within the Black church or the Latina or Latino church? And so we offer resources and teachings on that, because I think that really impacts how someone recognizes, responds, and refers someone to appropriate supports.
Mm,
And then we have the community track, which is all about it's more psychoeducational, if that term is makes sense to people. It's more about the general experiences of mental health. And I think that one really centers much more on recognizing what are
Mm,
the signs and symptoms of
yeah.
mental health? What does it look like? What are people experiencing? What does anxiety mean? How can I talk about medications? We're not prescribing, we're not diagnosing, we're not treating or offering case management. What we're doing is we're recognizing what people are experiencing for what they are. And then there are some specific tracks. Like I said, it's only 15, 20 minutes, so we can't go too deep
sure.
into it. But there are some certain talks, specifically spiritual first aid, which is a presenting partner in the event, where they talk much more on how to respond appropriately within the context of your role and your function and your expertise, and then how to
Mm,
refer. And so we definitely break it down by I try to break it down, but everyone has a different talk. So whether they're focused on one or the other, it's really
Sure.
hard. Yeah, and then the 3rd track is church health, and that is much more about creating safe spaces, talking about culture, stigma, congregational care, how you can infuse well-being into your discipleship process, things like that. Something that is within the walls of the church, things like small groups or children's ministry, youth, for example.
Yeah.
And then the 4th track is about leadership health. And I think this is a great place to start, even though it's the 4th track. If we're not healthy ourselves, we're really acting as wounded healers. And I learned that term from a friend of mine, Thad Austin, and he's speaking at the event. It's a really great term to remind ourselves that we all come with bias and experience that we don't maybe want to slime or pass on to other people. And so, really, just focusing on okay, leaders, how can we recognize burnout? How can we remain healthy? How can we support our families in ministry, because they often bear the brunt of service that consumes a lot of time and energy. And so those are the 4 tracks. And so while we don't have a specific pathway or a framework as a whole, because there's 70 speakers, every speaker addresses an aspect of that recognizing, responding, and referring appropriately within the context of your role.
I am so, so glad that you included that 4th category. I mean, that's largely where the work I do centers on is like we lead out of our own health. And if we aren't feeling strong and resilient and if we don't have the capacity and the resources as leaders, then people that come to us are just a burden, right? It's like one more
Mhm.
person who's going to take something from me that I don't have available to me, especially if you're in the middle of burnout and feeling compassion fatigue and exhaustion and everything else. And then someone comes at you with this intense need. And of course, it's a natural response when you're in that place already to just say, I can't do it. I can't do it. I cannot get involved. Like, I won't touch you with a 10
Yes.
foot pole. And so I
Yes.
love that you've included that track of like,
Mm.
how do you as a leader remain healthy and well so that you can
Mhm.
actually be a resource for other people. And so you can recognize and respond and refer. So Chef
Yes.
cheese
And I share
alliteration. Stars.
Love it. Hey, we're talking to
That's
preachers
right.
here. We
Hey,
gotta have that.
Absolutely. Well, I
Jeff and
just
I are always arguing about whether something needs to alliterate
it
or not.
does.
And he's always like, it has to start with the same letter. And I'm like, no, it's too cute. Just let it be what it is. And he's like, no, it has to be sticky. It's got to be like the same
They'll
letter.
remember it. So, well, I'm just going to hand it back to the both of you because, we can't talk about all four of those like tracks, but I
Mhm.
think you both probably have a lot of experience on the leadership track. I know, Laura, that you also have another kind of ministry or business, Hope Made Strong, that is specifically for church leaders and helping do some of that stuff. And Sid, you do a lot of work, obviously, with leaders and coaching and spiritual direction. So I'll just throw a question out to the two of you. What is it maybe about the leadership role or the people who find themselves in leadership, and we'll ask the negative and then the positive, that like keeps them from getting the help that they need or even keeps them from recognizing that they like need help? I'm
Mm.
just going to whoever wants to jump in first.
Oh, those are,
Well, I can
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, you first.
Well,
No, after you. No, after you.
there you go. There's the helper in us. Well, I was just going to share a little bit of my story, not a long, just saying that I can empathize with this because I have experienced compassion fatigue that required therapy, counseling, time off of work, sick time, and being away. Because when you were describing, I guess this is video based, but when you were, for those who are listening on the podcast, when you were describing people experiencing burnout, you put your hands, both hands up in a stop position. And there was a time when I found myself doing that with a client, and I'm very ashamed of saying that, but it's the raw, honest truth that they were unloading a whole lot of trauma on me from their past, and at that point, I was fully in fatigue and nightmares at night and, like, exhaustion and emotional irregularity. I was the tipping point, but I did not see it in myself until I crossed that boundary with the client where I inhibited them from sharing their
Mm,
story and seeking healing, for themselves because I was protecting myself. I did not see the anger that I was expressing to my family at the end of the day. I wasn't seeing how I was isolating myself or how my physical health was being impacted until it impacted my clients. And I just can empathize with anyone who is struggling with seeing the signs and symptoms because I most certainly didn't either. And it wasn't until I took time off and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take 2 weeks off and I'll be back to work." What am I supposed to do? Nothing? Just
mm.
rest? Are you kidding me? My whole life is serving others, whether it's my young children or my clients or my community and volunteering. And then those first 2 weeks, I've never been so sick in my life because my body shut down and was, like, desperate for healing, and it took 2 months for me to even begin to feel normal and healthy again. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just sharing a little bit of my story that I can empathize with someone who
Mm,
struggles with seeing the signs and
yeah, thank
symptoms.
you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, I think I mean, just before I talk from my own perspective too, is I think that makes so much sense when you think about like your nervous system and how your nervous system has two priorities. It can either connect with people or it can protect you. And it doesn't
Mm,
do both at the same time very well or very often. And so just that sense of like when you're in that mode where you're like, you're already defaulted into that, I have to protect myself state. It's too threatening to notice that you might be hurting other people or that you might be
mm,
impacting other people in a negative way because you're already in protection mode. And so all you can see is what's coming at me, what's going to drain me, how do I keep
yes.
myself together, how do I survive this? And when that's the case, you're not going to notice that, like, oh, I'm snapping at people because that's
Yeah,
scary to look at because it's going to mess with your
yeah,
survival.
yeah.
So, just in your story, I think that's one of the things I would say is that I think we don't, I think and a lot of this is just the culture we've been shaped in and the way that we've
Mhm,
grown up. I think the younger generations are getting better at it, of being aware of bodies and how bodies impact life and how life impacts our bodies. But I think there's a lot of disconnect in the
mhm,
church between body, soul, mind. And so it's this sense of like, it's easy to fall into the trap. And I know I have fallen into that trap of like a good disciple does not ever take time for themselves or A good disciple doesn't
Yeah.
ever turn people away. Like Jesus was exhausted when he walked into a crowd of 5,000 people and he didn't send them away. He started teaching them and then he fed them and so
Yeah.
if you look at Jesus as the example, it's always like, well, Jesus doesn't seem to really get weary. Like he just keeps
Mm.
going. And then he has these beautiful times of communion with his father. And then he comes out of that refreshed to perform more miracles. And so I think there's that sort of expectation of like, and I think it comes down to identity and self-perception of, like you said, Laura, who am I if I'm not helping people? And so
Right.
there becomes this sense of I'm so used to being the one who helps, the one who serves, the one who has something helpful to offer, that like if I don't have that and if I don't do that, then what does that say about me as a person,
Mm.
as a human? What does it say about me as a follower of Jesus? And so I think those are scary questions. And then when you add to that, that a lot of leaders have a hard time developing significant friendships within their communities,
Yeah.
it's just really hard
Yeah.
sometimes to have a reciprocal relationship with people within your community because there is so much expectation on you as a leader. And then people are unconsciously putting all of their baggage and woundedness on you and
Right.
reacting to you as if they're reacting to the person who hurt them 10 years ago and
Right.
not aware that's what they're doing. And so I think
Mm.
it's complex why
It
we
is.
end up not recognizing the signs and why we end up not prioritizing our own mental health. But
Yeah.
that's why I'm so glad that you have a whole track dedicated to that. And I'm so glad that conversation about healthy leaders, I feel like it's becoming more out in the open and less of a hiding in the closet, chatting with other people, going, are you sick of people too?
Yes. Yeah. You said something interesting there, and I know this isn't the top of our conversation, but I just wanted to highlight it for a second that the body as Christians, at least where the timeline that I grew up in, we often talked about the body as being something negative.
Mm,
And we have to it's the flesh, the body, we have to cast it down or set it aside or hold it back to let the spirit move. And I think we're like you said, we're recognizing now that the body is a gift. It's part of who we are. God created it. It's not something to be suppressed or ignored or pushed down, but welcomed and respected, honored, listened to, and treated well, and knowing that it is part of us, not something to be ignored or pushed
So
away.
true.
yeah, and actually we're
Mm.
not human without it, right? And
Yeah,
so, I
exactly.
mean, Jeff and I
Key.
yeah. I mean, Jeff and I are so convinced of this. That's why the podcast is called
Right.
Embodied Faith, right? It's impossible to have
Yeah.
a faith that is not embodied. Like whether you like it or
Mm.
not, you're carrying it around inside a body. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's so good that we're recognizing
Yeah.
that the body is not just baggage we haul around, but
Yeah.
one of the it's the only place God can meet us. It's the only
Mhm.
place we can
It's true.
be.
So
So, what
true.
would
Yeah.
be, and we can just stay on the leadership thing, but then, and I'll start with you, Laura. What would be,
Yeah.
whether it's something you learned personally or just things you've learned through the past summits, but what would be like two things that leaders can do for themselves to help with their like mental health lives, this the moving from surviving to thriving? Like, what is like maybe just two things you'd want to throw out to encourage other people?
I think you mentioned it earlier about having friendships and connection. We often get really heady into what's a huge problem that's feeling overwhelming, so it must have a huge solution and a complicated solution. But I try to keep things simple as possible. I don't need any more complexities to my life. Thank you very much. So I would like just keep things simple. So I would say having fun and connecting with other people. Hey, if you can pair those
Friends and
together,
fun,
ideal.
actually, the two
Friends and
F's.
fun. Oh, the
Yeah, that's right.
alliteration, bringing it
That's right.
back. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, friends, just connecting. And these don't have to be, you don't have to meet weekly, but having a friend that you are accountable with and can connect with, whether it's a cousin, a brother, a sister, a college friend, doesn't matter who it is, but someone to connect with so you can be who you are, not the title of who you are, the expectation, but just be you. And then fun. Fun
Yeah.
is so healthy. Like, when was the last time you had fun? I was talking with a pastor about this, just overcoming burnout and building resiliency. And we really settled in on this aspect of fun. I was like, what did you do when you were 8 years old? Like, what was it? Was it biking? Was it Lego? What was it? And they said that they used to decorate their dollhouse. And I was like, that's so cool. And how creative is that? Has nothing to do with people. It's just creativity and doing something that is pleasurable, that it looks beautiful and is just simple. And so they got their dollhouse out
Mm.
as a 40-year-old leader out of the attic and went to the dollar store, the crafting store. And in the evening, they just played. And they said it was so
I love
refreshing. I
that.
know it seems simple, but I think we just think everything needs to be
Yeah.
serious or we have to produce something or that hustle culture. But really, having fun and play is healing and it's the joy of the Lord, right? We
And
want to just be someone, not do, be. It's not all about doing, it's about being.
Mm.
So I
yeah,
would say friends and fun.
Well, Sid, do
those are
you
great.
really quickly, do you have any two others, one or two that you want to add to that as
Yeah,
long as they
mine
start with
probably
F?
won't alliterate.
Oh,
I'll just tell you now.
Oh, we'll figure it
fail.
out. We'll
Yeah.
find a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I think one of the I think joy, I love that you said fun and play because I think that's really important, but I also think there's a lot of people who find themselves so deep in burnout that fun feels like too much work.
Yes.
And so I would say, I think probably the best thing anybody can do for themselves is to befriend their own body and to learn.
Befriend. What?
I did say befriend your body, but it's only one
That's true.
thing.
She already
So,
said
and
friends. So just make friends with your own
yeah,
body. It's like an
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so, I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about doing the online courses that I do, like just teaching like about what is going on in your body and why do you react that way and how can you do things in your body, whether it's moving or breathing or
Yeah.
whatever it's doing to help you to calm yourself so that you can stop prioritizing protection and even just for a few moments prioritize connection so that you can hang out with friends and have fun. So I would say that Laura's ideas and my ideas come together in
Yeah.
that when you befriend your body and learn what's going on in your body and learn how you can work with your body to bring yourself to a place of having enough energy to then go pursue a friendship or go pursue something
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny that the social worker did the practical thing and the therapist did like the reflective
Oh, I'm not a
introspection.
therapist. I'm
Not a
She's a
therapist.
coach,
Oh,
no.
though. She's like
you
a spiritual director
coach,
coach. Yeah, exactly.
spiritual director. I just was like, oh, this is so on brand
Yeah,
for what we do.
Well, to both
But I
those
think they
points.
companion each other really well.
Oh,
I mean, I
absolutely.
think
Yeah,
there's
I agree.
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
Well, that's
agree.
the thing is we are part of what we talk about as being embodied and embodied faith is certainly your own physical bodies, but also your embedded relationships, right? So how you're
Yeah.
embedded in the
Mm.
ways will affect you in
Did
substantial
you
ways.
catch that? Embodied and
Yeah, I
embedded.
know.
He's all
I
into
got
it.
two more too. But and I tell leaders this all the time. The next best, most spiritual thing you could do is good to get a good night's rest. Like
Yes.
just sleep
Yeah.
more as best as you can, for sure. Well, thank you so much for just sharing the vision for the Church Mental Health Summit, as well as just your own personal story and some of your leadership kind of reflections. Where can people find out all this stuff? I'll be sure to get it in the show notes. But how can people make sure not to miss this on October 10th?
Yeah, churchmentalhealthsummit.com is the website where you can sign up for free. If you're looking for that access pass, just keep scrolling down that page and you'll have links to do the access pass. If you're curious more about what I do around congregational care, you can find me at hopemadestrong.org.
Excellent.
And I just want to put a little note in there. Like I looked at my own calendar when I found out about this, and I have a pretty full day that day. But I'm going to
Mm,
sign up
yeah.
anyway because even if I only get to watch one or two or three of those little 15 to
Yep.
20-minute talks, I know that's still going to be a benefit to me. And then if I love it, I can do the access pass. But I just want to like encourage anybody who's like, oh, I have plans on October 10.
Mhm.
Even if it's only one or two talks, there might be something that just really hugely encourages you or equips you in a new way or raises awareness in some way. So I would say it's worth doing, even if it's only one or two talks. So it's
Absolutely.
free,
Why
FRE
not?
free.
And there's no schedule. I think that's what trips people up too. Time zones
Yeah.
and things like that. It's like, oh, I can't shuffle my day. You don't have to shuffle your day. You just have to log on and scroll and click and there you go. 20 minutes while you're eating lunch.
I love it.
Perfect.
Well, thank you again. And all those links and everything will be in the show notes. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening, you can find this on Google, Spotify, Apple, all places. And share this around with other people that maybe you think would like to be a part of the summit. But thanks again, Laura. And let's stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, it's fun to
Yes,
be
thank
with
you.
you, Laura.
You as well. Take care.